everybody, it's Romania Black, and we are on episode 6 of Vinland Saga Season 2, and we're going to be like a fourth of the way through the season at this point, which it seems like we've had stuff happening this first part of the season, but it doesn't feel like we're, at the same time, a fourth of the way through the season feels like we've gone through a lot, and yet we have so much to go. And I'm excited about that because that means we're going to get a lot of content this season, which I'm looking forward to a lot. And Vinland Saga, the pacing of it has been good. It's not been rushing through anything. It's taken its time setting up these characters, setting up the emotional stakes, setting up everything happening around them so that when things get crazy later on, which I am sure they will, we've had all of this foundation set up and it's going to be really good. So I'm pretty excited about that. I've got some comments to talk about before we start, but I'm really, really excited. We've just now found out where Canute has been this whole time, what he's been up to. There's still questions surrounding him that we talked about in the last reaction that I'm going to be curious about to see if we get answers to those questions sooner or if we're going to wait for them. So I'd like to think Vinland Saga is going to have us wait for them, but we'll see, right? We'll see. But I do some comments before we start the episode. Jana talked about how could Arnheid buy her freedom? They asked this in the comments. They were like, you know, if there's a possibility of Thorfinn and Einar buying their freedom, could Arnheid do the same? And my knee-jerk reaction was, no, she's a lady. That was like my knee-jerk reaction of ladies can't do things back in ancient times except have kids and be wives. So, but I'm not familiar with my Danish English history back from that time period in the early thousands. So I don't know. Maybe it was a little more matriarchal, but I'm going to guess no, that they really didn't have any options. What I told Jana in the comments was that my theory would be that the only way Arnheid could get her freedom, technically, would be if she married someone that had their freedom, or if someone just let her go. So, you know, maybe that's how maybe Einar marries her to get her freedom. I don't know. Someone asked me, they're like, well, how do you feel about Arnheid and Einar if Thorfinn's being shipped with Einar? And I'm like, I'm a multi-shipper. I can go either way. If you told me that Thorfinn and Einar were together, cool. If you told me that Einar got with his lady friend Arnheid, cool. I just want Thorfinn to be in a permanent ship with happiness. If I'm being honest, he needs it at this point. But yeah, I don't care either way. I told them there's no OTPs right now for me in Vinland Saga. Not really. There's not really any OTP pairings that I'm like, oh, ride or die for this couple. It's just really fun because I think Thorfinn needs Einar. I really do, as an emotional support. And Einar is going to learn a lot from Thorfinn by being in a relationship with him. So that's where we're at with those characters. Killer Queen 2000 brought up a good point. The tree branches at Thorfinn's feet in episode 4 could be representing the bodies of those he's killed and could tie to the act of cutting trees down. I was like, yeah, that's kind of a cool metaphor that you see that Einar and Thorfinn are cutting a tree down this entire time. They're cutting trees, and the branches and stuff could also tie to the dead bodies, which in turn, it kind of represents that act of how Thorfinn views what he's done in the past. Thorfinn's like, what I did in the past was for a reason. I had to do it to keep on this track of revenge. So those dead bodies were kind of a necessity, kind of like the branches we step on that are just littering the ground are a necessity for us to chop down this tree. Kind of like in order for me to get revenge on Askeladd, I had to go through all these people to get there. The problem is when he got to that tree, got ready to chop it down, Canute came and steamrolled it over for him and said, okay, I'm taking this tree by. And Thorfinn's like, wait, I've worked all this time for it. What do you mean you're taking it from me? So that's kind of the analogy there. But I like that a lot, Killer Queen. I thought that was a really, really good way of phrasing that. Evil Communist Pickle Rick. Again, one of the best handles on YouTube. I love it. Noted from apparently in another video, someone had pointed out that that the dung beetle in episode 4 was rolling up the feces into a little ball. As Thorfinn says, the strong kill the weak. That's natural. Showing how Thorfinn, without realizing at first, kind of became this strong warrior and killed the weak almost as a mistake he was thrown into. Like, he didn't really mean for all this to happen, but it happened and he was strong, so he was able to survive. Which is interesting because later in the scene when we're talking about insects, we see the dung beetle rolling up the little ball of poo. And then later we have all the crickets surrounding them in the barn. And when Einar goes to like strangle Thorfinn, the crickets stop making a sound because crickets are bugs. They're easily crushed, right? And they stop making a sound and their noises die out. But then when he stops trying to kill Thorfinn and kind of turns away and lets go, the crickets start back up again, kind of signifying that the crickets are able to live. The weak don't always have to die. And what's funny about that is I was thinking about that comment after you said that, Pickle Rick, and I was thinking, well, that's being human. Humans are kind of one of the rare exceptions where the weak don't always die. The structure that works for animals doesn't always work for humans. Sometimes the weak characters do live. Look at Gunnar. Look at Floki. Compare them to Ragnar and Askeladd. I would argue Ragnar and Askeladd were much stronger characters than Gunnar and Floki, but they are not alive. So it's one of those scenarios, right, where things are kind of, to be human is kind of to turn on nature itself, which is very interesting when you think about it. So that was a really good comment to point out. And then finally, Alexander Q talked about how Thorfinn's kind of been tugged at in terms of what ideals he should live for. He's kind of been on this big teeter-totter and tug-of-war game where, he has his dad and his dad was all about being idealistic and resisting war and resisting violence and becoming a family man. And Askeladd was all about, seeking revenge and being kind of selfish and for your own self-preservation. And so Thorfinn's not really had the time to develop his own ideas of what he wants to do. So when that question is put before him like a challenge, what do you live for? Thorfinn's never really had time to think about that or to decompress and kind of, marinate on that thought. Like, what do I do? So it's interesting. And I feel like this season is going to be testing Thorfinn. Okay, you don't have to worry about Askeladd anymore and revenge. Your father's not in the picture right now. What are you going to live for? What are your ideals? And so I wonder if this season is going to be developing those for Thorfinn. And by the end of the season, when he has his beautiful goatee, he will have constructed those ideals alongside Einar. And he will have also figured out what his goals are. So we'll see. But I thought that was really interesting. And then also finally, Alexander Q pointed out a really good point that in Thorfinn's dreams, we had the soldiers from season 1. We had the woman from season 1. And he's talking about these monsters and they appear monstrous. Askeladd's nowhere to be seen. And you would think, as Alexander Q pointed out, that for someone he spent all this time trying to kill that would be the ultimate enemy, you'd think he'd be at the forefront of those dreams. But he's not. And it's not just because he's dead, because all those soldiers and that woman are dead. So is it because he didn't kill Askeladd? Is it because Askeladd maybe isn't the big enemy he thought he was? That's a very good question. So I don't know. We ended last episode with Canute taking the throne. Obviously, that is taking place in a little bit of the future from where we are with Thorfinn and Einar and Olmar, because Olmar was talking about Prince Canute. Now we have King Canute. So with Canute's storyline, we're a little bit in the future. So I don't know if we will... I wonder if we're going to spend a lot of time with Thorfinn and Einar. I can't decide if it's Einar or Einar, so y'all have to forgive me. But I don't know if we're going to spend some more time with those two leading up to us getting the timelines in sync, or if we're going to spend a little bit more time in the past with Thorfinn and then more time in the future with Canute, and eventually the timelines will finally find a way to converge. That would be kind of cool. I've not watched a series in a while where we had 2 different timelines going on that we had to follow, but I don't know. Or maybe we'll spend some time with Thorfinn to catch up to where Canute is. It would be cool if where Canute is now with his facial hair and the kingly crown is also when we catch up to with Einar and Thorfinn with their own goatees. No Shave November, y'all. That's where we're at. So I'm pretty excited, though. It's technically Valentine's Day on Patreon when this airs. So what better way to celebrate Valentine's with Vikings? Viking Valentines. I poured myself a Valentine beverage and was like, let's just celebrate. Why not? So gather up your significant other, gather up your dog, cat, what have you, and come join us in this journey through Vinland Saga. It's been 10 minutes. We might as well talk about this. So we are going to start episode 6 of season 2 of Vinland Saga, and we are going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's do this. Well, I can already see it now. I can already see some of the people being like, there's no action in this episode. But no, I loved this. I may be in the minority of people that is loving Vinland Saga for being this deep character study and thematic themes of war, violence, and freedom. I'm like, yes, please. I do feel, and if you've not watched Attack on Titan, I'm not going to spoil anything for you, but I feel like in Attack on Titan, a lot of similar themes, especially the theme of freedom and the price of said freedom and how we define how we live in our relationships. There's a lot of similarities between Vinland Saga and Attack on Titan and those kind of things. The thing that's a little bit different is that in Attack on Titan, it's like you're in the middle of this doom and gloom, depth and despair where you're struggling through these topics, and sometimes it feels like there's not a lot of time to really let those concepts simmer and sink in. There's a couple episodes I could think of where that does happen, so I'm not gonna say it doesn't, but it's everything's happening all at once. You don't really get time to sit and process it. Here, Vinland Saga, this second season, like I said, we're only on episode 6 of like 25. So there's gonna be time where all this stuff we are dealing with is going to be challenged, put to the sword, so to speak, and tested, right? But when you have a character like Thorfinn, who went all of season 1 in this stagnant, plateaued state, and a lot of people were complaining, myself included, being like, I wish Thorfinn would grow and change and develop as a character. Well, for him to develop as a character, he's got to go through that, right? And there's different ways you can have a character do that. And we've already seen Thorfinn go through battles and war, so that's not how he needs to learn. Thorfinn's a different kind of learner. So, you have people that are kinesthetic learners, audio learners, visual learners. I'm a teacher, so, students learn it different ways. Clearly, battle is not the way for Thorfinn to learn. He kind of just plateaus and doesn't learn anything. For him, it's his relationship with Einar. It's learning these things by these conversations with others. When you're in the middle of a battle, you don't have time for those conversations. So I laughed so hard when Thorfinn was like, I learned a lot today. I was like, good, great, because like Einar says, he is kind of an overgrown baby. It's so bizarre to me hearing this voice from teenage Thorfinn come from an adult Thorfinn's mouth. Like the animation is making him look older and older, especially with the facial hair. He looks like a full-blown adult now, right? Which is hilarious because his voice still sounds like the same voice, which it is, coming from teenage Thorfinn. So it's almost like your brain has to process that. And so it's great. I can't believe we're already to the goatees. I didn't think that was happening yet. I thought that was going to be like way down the line, but nope, we're here. That does make me curious because we're only in episode 6. And we've already pretty much touched base on everything in the OP and ED. So, and I feel like they did that with the first OP in season 1. We got through everything that was in them within those first 6 or 7 episodes. So then the next 5 episodes before we changed course, we didn't know what to expect. So I'm okay with that. I'm fine with that. But I just can't believe we've already tackled literally everything in there. But I will say, if those of you that the first third of this episode, if you were like, man, what are we going to talk about in this episode? Is it just going to be Thorfinn and Einar Farm Simulator? I do get that, because at the very start, the first couple minutes, I was like, okay, this is going to be a low-key episode. All right, fine, fair enough. But then once Snake and the grandpa, and we find out that grandpa is Kettle's father, and we start talking about those kind of things involving his way of life, I'm like, oh, we're getting into a lot deeper concepts from the episode that, again, is building on what we know. So let's dive into this. And I will say, first and foremost, in the last episode, there were some salty comments that were just like, well, how would you not think that was Canute? Such and such reactor figured out it was Canute. Good for them. Great for them. I have 2 master's degrees. I didn't know it was Canute. I'm sorry. I didn't know, I couldn't connect his eyes that well. I'm so sorry. So I will say, first and foremost, I do not think I am an expert in anything. I'm doing this for fun. I'm talking about this series because I love it and it's fun, but I don't expect anybody to listen to anything I say and be like, she's an expert in Viking lore. Hell no. But I do love talking about symbolism and themes in stories. I think story, as an English teacher, storytelling is literally the bread and butter of our existence in humanity. And so it's what ties us together as humans. And so we're the only species that does such things. So I have a big affinity for it. And I love when stories get really, really detailed and kind of into like intense in how they tell their stories. And this story kind of does it. So let's skip the OP. Let's get past all that, right? Still, I'm amazed we've gotten so far. Although they have the set of oh gosh, again, like I say, the medieval, the barracks, the things to shackle, the shackles, they have those at the end. So I'm a little worried about that. We haven't covered that yet. So, but yeah, so we need a horse. I can only think of like the old fashioned cartoon that's like, gotta have a horse, have a horse, have a horse. I can only think of that. And now that song's been stuck in my head the whole episode. Man, I will say, if you have ever done any type of farm work, which I grew up on a farm, we didn't have to pull out tree roots like this. We had machinery that could do it. But the idea of doing this by hand, I don't know if you've ever dug out tree roots before. I have a few times with my family. That shit's hard. I was sitting there watching Einar being like, dude, also showing how just like ripped our dudes are. They are some strong guys. Like Einar's got some muscles. Thorfinn has some muscles, and them trying to tear out that tree. Yeah, humans can't do it alone. No. There has to be technology. And I love the subtle foreshadowing of seeing the snake at the start of the episode. That should have been foreshadowing to us, the audience, that Snake was going to appear in this episode. But I was like, I don't know if that's the case or what that is, but him watching from the trees, right? Snake is such an interesting character. I wanted to bring Whiteboard Coon out to kind of talk about the themes and things going on in this episode and to talk about our characters, right? And kind of how things are for them. But man, yeah, seeing Thorfinn and Einar just struggling so hard and realizing like, we gotta have a horse to do this. We can't, and then they try to dig it out, and yeah, the root system on any tree is just insanity. Like, you can't just dig out a tree instantly. It's not easy. And so I'm glad that they realistically show how hard this is, right? It's like, we're never going to get this done by the time we need to plant if we don't do it. So I want to say first, though, kind of the Einar's system and his plan that he has on here, right? So Einar's plan, go right on here, is that obviously he wants to till the land and plant and harvest it. And in turn, he wants to buy back his freedom. Einar is a slave to that concept. He's literally a slave right now, but he is a slave figuratively to that concept of freedom. His whole goal in mind is getting that freedom back. That is his MO. That is the goal that he has, right? That's his objective. And so then you have Thorfinn, on the other hand. And I thought it was kind of interesting that throughout this episode, every time Einar would be like, okay, we need to get the horse so that we can get the tree roots taken out, so we can get this plot of land ready. And his response was, for a lot of it, was, well, we can't get the horse, so why don't we just clear more trees? Why don't we just keep getting trees out of the way and cutting them down? And Einar's like, no, that's not solving the problem. So what I like about this is that Einar, he has this goal in mind. He knows how he needs to achieve it. So he is able to prioritize. He's able to prioritize and focus on that one bit. It's not exactly micromanaging, but he's like, here's our task, let's do it. Thorfinn, kind of like his character throughout season 1, because he has no goal, he doesn't really know what he wants to do, he just keeps on, I'm trying to think of the best way to word this, he keeps on clearing the forest. He wants to keep clearing the forest, but not finish the job. He doesn't know how to finish the job. He doesn't know how to get closure. So his only option is to keep clearing more trees, and maybe something will happen. And that's kind of what season 1 was for Thorfinn. He didn't know what to do. He didn't know how exactly to make, he didn't understand his father's ideals. He didn't know what to do. He didn't know how to get back home. He wanted revenge, but he wasn't sure how. So he just kept clearing all the enemies in front of him, clearing everything in sight, but he didn't know how to get closure and how to close the gap between him and Askeladd or find a way to get a new focus. So he just kept just stalling and plateauing and wasn't finishing the job or going anywhere. That's kind of related to this idea. Like, Einar has a goal, has a plan, wants to see it through, and knows the steps to do it because he's a farmer. Thorfinn, they raised sheep, but he was like 6. He doesn't remember how to do that. So he may not even remember the sheep at this point. So it's been this constant idea of just, he's had trouble with closure and moving forward. He's not sure how to do that. And that's been the struggle through season 1, and that's the struggle that he's facing now. And Einar is trying to help him. Also, it's Einar, not Einar, so I'm going to stick with Einar. The show says Einar, so that's what I'm doing. But yeah, I find that interesting that this entire episode is kind of a metaphor of where our characters are and what we're doing. And the idea of we need a horse. Like, the roots are too deep. We need help, right? We need an assistance. So I'm going to come over here and just put down our thematic things. So the idea of a horse is the idea of assistance. The idea of assistance, of aid. That is, and it's that theme of you can't do it alone. You've got to have help, right? And it's that work smarter, not harder mentality. That we're not going to get anywhere. And I like you see Thorfinn with all the cuts and scrapes on him and everything. He's like, they lent us one to move the lumber, so why not prepare the soil? He's like, it doesn't make sense. And Thorfinn's like, yeah, they didn't lend us the horse for the lumber. They were supposed to do that job and we did it for them. So Thorfinn's not dumb. He understands the system. And then Einar's like, well, then I'll just keep trying to talk to him. Einar, I honestly relate to Einar a lot in this episode because his method would be mine. You just keep bugging them until it works. If I'm at work and there's someone I have to talk to and they're being kind of like, they're not getting to the point, I'm like, okay, well, let's get to the bottom of this and crack the code so we can move forward. Like, me and Einar were on like the same wavelength this episode. And it was kind of funny. But yeah, they just walk along. I love Einar's just strut throughout the thing. He's just so, when he gets mad and when he's happy, his mad and happy walk are the same thing. They're just like this big old long gait. And so here's the thing. They go to the people in the village to get the horse. There is a stable full of horses, totally ready to go. And they say that Pater gave them permission. And the one guy's like, Pater? Oh, you mean the former slave? No. So there is this idea, right, that there's still going to be prejudice. There's still going to be prejudice because of your life as a slave, former or current. Which is probably why Pater works, which now that makes more sense. I was questioning a few episodes ago why Pater still worked for Kettle if he was free. I'm like, well, why does he still work for him? Well, 1, he may not have a home to go back to, so he doesn't know what to do. And 2, because he's a former slave, he might not be able to get any resources on his own because of assholes like this that aren't going to loan it to him. So Kettle offers him a job and he's like, well, I really don't have a choice. Guess I'm going to do it, right? So I feel like there is still this prejudice, and I think this is the first time that Einar and Thorfinn kind of get a taste of it. He's like, no, we're all using horses for other work. We don't have any to spare for you. And I like that horse. That horse looks directly at the camera like, he's full of shit. We're not doing anything. Like, he's just, I love that horse looks directly, I'm going to get a shot of that. The horse looks directly at the camera like, this guy is full of more horse shit than I am. Just so we're clear. I love that. And Einar's just like, that seems not right. And he's like, you're wasting your time, slaves. Quit slacking off and head back to the woods. I like that Thorfinn this whole time is just like, Domo. He reminded me of Kuroko from Kuroko's Basketball. Every time somebody walks up to Kuroko, he's like, hello. And Thorfinn's like, hello. Which is absolutely hilarious because Knut's voice actor plays Kuroko in that series. So that's kind of funny. That's really cute, actually. But he's like, I only heard one hello. And Einar's like, I would rather say anything than hello to you right now. Like, whatever. And then he says, we're taking a horse. And the guy's like, oh, sure. Like, for them, they just get it. They don't have to even, they just ask and that's it. He's like, slaves are no different than livestock. now that I think about it. And Einar's like, I'm done. I'm not even going to try. He's like, borrowing a plot of land and running a farm is insolent enough. So it's kind of one of those, it's so sad, right? Because what that guy is suggesting is, oh, well, we had to fight for our land and we had to get them, you know, we were free men and we got it on our own laurels. And I'm like, well, Thorfinn and Einar didn't ask to be slaves. They weren't like freeloaders that signed up for being slaves to get off scot-free. They were literally taken from their homes or taken from their location. They didn't sign up for this. So it's just like the injustice of that, right? That this guy, I'm like, that's so stupid. He's like, use your own bodies to do the work, as he walks away with the horse. And Einar's like, screw him. And I just love his mad walk. We just got to talk to the master. And Thorfinn's like, you're just going to make the retainers mad. And he's like, and I like that he says, we'll just be upsetting the retainers. They'll hate us even more. He's like, well, then what are we going to do? We can't do it by ourselves. It's not going to get done. Who knows how many years it'll take for us to finally start farming. And that's kind of the thing that we talked about back at the beginning of this. It's like, yeah, Kettle has this setup. It seems like a great deal. But again, that idea, and I won't write it up here, but Kettle, actually I'm going to put Kettle and his dad up here because they seem to have very different ideals, right? I'm going to put this on here. So Kettle's dad... Kettle and his father, whose name escapes me, and we'll get it here in a minute. But Kettle's idea is that he has this deal that if you work, you can work for your freedom. All right. And Huck is like, got something up his nose. He's like, you can work for your freedom, right? That's kind of his ideal. And he has this kind of like idealistic view of kind of slavery in this case, maybe put it that way. But yeah, Kettle kind of has this idealistic view of like, oh, well, you just work for your freedom, and yeah, you just borrow the stuff and I'll make money off you and it'll be fine. And kind of this like how you earn your freedom, whereas his dad is literally like, you work and fight for your freedom. It seems like he's like, him and his dad are at odds of how they deal with stuff. But Kettle's like, sure, you work for me and you'll work for your freedom. But the way that Kettle, I guess the big difference between him and his dad is that Kettle believes that that you can still have pride from earning freedom out of slavery. And this marker is about had it, but he's like, he believes that you can still have pride in the fact that, oh, you did this yourself, look at you, whatever. And I don't think the father, Olmar's grandfather, buys into that at all. He's like, no, where's the pride in that? No. So, but it's becoming more and more clear that on the surface, Kettle's plan sounds great. Like, oh, you'll just earn your freedom by building your own farm and paying me back. But Einar and Thorfinn are realizing that it's a lot harder than it seems. The people in the village don't like you because you're slaves, and they have pride in what they own, and they think you're taking a piece of that, so they don't like it. They think that they had to work hard to get where they are, and you're just borrowing from people, so they're not happy about it. So, yeah, they're realizing that this deal maybe is not as easy as it once seemed, right? He says, how many years will that take us? And Thorfinn says, the woods are vast. Let's just clear some more land. Again, he's like, he's almost running from something that's right in front of him, right? Because he's afraid of the unknown, maybe. Maybe Thorfinn is afraid he doesn't know what he'll do if he's faced with something unknown that's unfamiliar to him. And Einar just looks at him like, he says it'll be impossible for us to level the land and start growing crops. And Einar's like, excuse me? He just stops what he's doing and grabs him. I like that he shoves him. He's like, Thorfinn, why are you unmotivated? I love it. Einar's like, why are you so unmotivated? He's like, don't you want to be free? We're going to grow crops no matter what. And then we'll sell them back to the master and buy back our freedom. And to do that, we need a horse. I just like that Thorfinn's like, oh, okay. For a guy who never eats a square meal, you've got a lot of energy. And he's like, well, you just don't have enough energy, asshole. I love their friendship. I love it. I love it. It's so good. I love that Einar's just like, come on, Thorfinn, get hyped, get motivated. What's wrong with you, man? And meanwhile, Thorfinn's like, there's helicopters spinning in the background. It's like, well, did you not see him sleep at night? And that's when the old man notices them. And it's the old man that Snake knows. So he's heard everything. He's heard that whole thing about buying your freedom, and here's how gung-ho Einar is, and like trying to get Thorfinn on board with it. And he's like, all right. And the thing about it is, we're going to talk about him, the Kettle's father. And his name is Sverkel, I think. Is it Sverkel? Sverkel? We're going to write it here in a second when it comes up on the screen. I think it's Sverkel. But his idea is just doing your own hard work. Now, we don't know whether or not, and that's really hard to see. We don't know if he had his own slaves. We don't know that. That part is not clear. If he had slaves himself, or if he really did do all this work himself. But it's the idea of doing your own hard work, and the idea that nothing is free. That I like a lot. This whole metaphor about getting the horse is this concept that nothing is given for free and without an exchange of something, right? You don't just stumble upon something without paying for it. And that payment doesn't have to be currency. It doesn't have to be physical, but you will pay to get anything that you have, right? If you want, you have to sacrifice something to get something. So if you want this horse, you're going to clean these rocks out of my field. If you want to keep the horse and use it again, you're going to help me do my chores. It's like Full Metal Alchemist, law of equivalent exchange. You've got to give me something to get something. You're not just going to get handed it to you for free on a silver platter. That's not how this works. And that doesn't really only apply to Einar and Thorfinn. You could take it back to the last episode. Canute, to get what he wanted, it wasn't free. He didn't just walk up to those earls and say, give me the crown and give me your support. No, it wasn't free. He had to make a payment. And in order for him to get the crown in the last episode, he had to pay the price. And the price was he had to kill people to get there. He paid in blood, right? In blood. And Thorkel's whole thing is he's like, for Thorkel, that currency wasn't good to him. Poison's not a good currency. It's not valid in the world of Thorkel. Thorkel's like, we deal in blood and iron. We deal from the sword, right? That's our currency, not poison, not wine. So it's fascinating that we're tying this concept back to Canute, and it also applies here, that Einar just wants to borrow a horse, and Kettle's kind of doing the same thing. He's borrowing the land to them, but he expects something in return. You're going to give me wheat, you're going to give me your goods, and so I can make a profit and then exchange that with you, right? So I love that concept being brought up in this episode. It's really, really good. And just the idea that he's like sitting there all hunched over, this old man. I like that they're all respectful enough to like cross over the different rows. Also, I think one of the problems with this series is that all the characters, if they're Danish, they all kind of look the same. So like they have the same sunken in eyes and everything, and lots of wrinkles, lots of wrinkly men in this series. And so it can be hard to tell the difference between some of them. But yeah, and he looks a little like Kettle, but not quite. And then he asks, and of course they come up and ask him for help. And he says, what are your names? He says, I'm Einar. And then he says, I'm Thorfinn. And he's like, shall I lend you one? A horse. And then I like that Einar's like, oh, sure. Einar gets all like cheesy and goofy when he's happy. I love it, but it's so funny. And then he's like, no, you're going to help me clean this out. Sverkel. There we go. I was wanting to spell it right. Sverkel. He's old Mars' grandpapa. Sverkel. Very, very, very old in Norse. Yeah, the old Danish. All right. He's a fascinating character. I really like him. And so he gets them to carry the basket back to help. And he's like, yes, sir, we'll clean your stuff up. And as they're chopping wood for him, which granted, he's an old man, He's like, he's taking advantage of us. And Einar, I was like, dude, he's like, we don't have time for this. I'm like, he's letting you borrow the horse. Those other people weren't going to let you do it. So can you really be picky? Like, it's a pretty fair exchange. This old man's having you do some stuff for him. And then does he live in this house all alone? And then Thorfinn says, I don't know. I've never met him, which does not surprise me. Thorfinn does not seem like the kind that would go around, meet the neighbors, find out who everybody is. That doesn't seem like Thorfinn at all. And Thorfinn's like, we would be doing something like this anyway, and we're slaves. But then he says, we're the master's slaves. So Einar, the way that Einar views it is that we only work for a specific person. And it's like, okay, sure. He's like, we only work for a specific person, right? And that's so funny because it's kind of like, we're only a slave to this one system, not everything. And I'm like, no, this episode is proving that you are slaves to quite many things, right? And everyone is. It's all just those people back there that were not slaves. They still lent a horse from someone. They still borrowed it. I'm sure at some point they're going to give something back to that guy in exchange for it. We just don't see it on screen. Just the idea that you get something by giving something, right? You can't just have one or the other. It's not the way the world works. And then the old man's like, I don't care what your circumstances are. This is our agreement. In exchange for borrowing the horse, you do my chores when you get it and when you bring it back. So I like that this old Sverkel, he deals like just in like, nope, this is our agreement. He's a man with a code. It seems like he has a warrior's code. A warrior's code and an exchange. And the idea of word is our bond. He's like, we made a bond. We said something and that's what we're going to do. Right? I like him. I like Sverkel. He's a good character so far. And so he's like, fine. And then they get the horse. They did the work, so they get the horse, right? And I feel like Sverkel, he sensed that these two guys like had a good heart and they weren't just sleazy people. I mean, there's a lot of people in this village that are sleazy, so I'm sure Sverkel was like, you guys seem like some decent, hardworking guys. And honestly, I feel like everyone else, they kind of ignore him, right? Everyone else kind of ignores him because he's the old master. He's not the new master. Everybody like sucks up to Kettle because he's the one with the money that's in charge of it, that's giving it out. Sverkel doesn't care. He seems like the kind that would bury his money in jars in the backyard. He doesn't care, so nobody wants to pay him time of day because he's not the one in charge of the system, right? And that's so common. And so I feel like Sverkel, these two guys taking their time to help him, he's like, okay, you're the first ones other than Snake, who he has like a father-son relationship with already. You're the first ones to really help me and notice me. Okay. And then, yeah, it was a lot easier to get the roots out. I love that he's just like petting the horse. He's like, come on, cute horsey. Like, I love it. And it looks like almost the same horse. I know it's not, that it was before. This is like, oh my God. He's like, that old man is a good guy, Einar. And Einar's a farmer, so he knows what to do. He knows how to treat the animals. It's cute. And then that motivation, I was going to talk about in the episode, is that it's kind of one of those things that once that kindness, that exchange, it motivates you to come back and do more. It builds that rapport, right? And so he wants to come back and help the next time because he sees the value of it. So it is an exchange. You can't say it's total freedom because they are borrowing from someone else, but it still gets the job done and helps you meet your goal. So is it bad? But yeah, he goes back to get the horse and they go and start clearing it out. And then they have the path cleared. And then we get the LP moment. Like they see the part all cleared out. And I can't get over how older Thorfinn looks. That side profile, it still baffles me how much older he is. And he looks like a damn man. And I'm used to little baby Thorfinn with his little feral gremlin face. And now he looks like a full-grown adult because he is one. And it's so mind-boggling. I'm like, I'm not ready for him to be a man. I'm not ready for it. Luckily, he's an overgrown baby, so it's fine. And I'm just standing there. And the bro hand, y'all. the bro hand on the shoulder, and Thorfinn looking back, and Einar having the light in his eye, like, we did it. Like, we're one step closer. Like him saying, like, the two of us, we're one step closer to our freedom, Thorfinn. I love the glimmer in his eyes. It's so good. I love it. I love it. And Thorfinn just been like, okay. And he doesn't smile, because Thorfinn smiling as an adult would be insane. But he doesn't look sad anymore. He just is like, okay. Just seems kind of indifferent, right? I love it. It's like, look at all our hard work, buddy, old pal. We're best buds. I love it. And so we might actually be sowing for the season. And we come to find out that Thorfinn has no clue about farming. No clue what to plant. Nothing. He has no clue what to do, because he's been in battle his whole life. And it's, to be fair, his family raised sheep, but his mom and his sister did a lot of the weaving. Thorfinn was too young to really do anything. So he's pretty unsure what to do. He's like, nobody farmed. And that's the thing. People did farm. Thorfinn just doesn't remember. And so Einar's kind of like, oh, that's funny. He's like, well, don't worry. Leave all the farming stuff to me. I'm a professional. So again, we have the idea of that exchange. She's like, you help me, I help you, right? That's kind of the back and forth in all of this. Which again is a subtle message, for in general, if you help somebody, they will probably help you in return. Probably. But then we have the jerks that don't believe that I was really glad this episode did not become a drama fest about I'm glad it didn't become Horsegate 2023. I was like, no, they didn't steal the horse, damn it. I was ready when that one guy's like, that looks like one of our horses. I was like, oh, don't you dare go there, sir. I was ready for them to fully convince and go to Kettle and say they stole the horse. And it was going to be this big old dramatic ordeal. I'm like, surely Vinland Saga will not go that route. We did not. They convinced them that it was Sverkel, the old master that lent them the animal. It's great. He's Kettle's father. He's the most important man on this farm. And yet nobody really knows who he is or cares about him. That's the sad thing. The sad thing is they say he's the most important man on the farm, but nobody seems to really watch over him or care about him because he doesn't have the money. He's not that important, right? Kettle's the one that has all the cards. Ugh. So they get a plow. They get a plow and they get a second horse, which is great. And Thorfinn's in charge of leading it, which is great. And they're tilling up all the soil from there. And I love this moment here because, he's talking about it about to rain and they'll need to get the equipment in. And he talks about how he wants that the roots are still showing. And again, if you grew up on a farm, my family did not grow crops. We grew hay and we raised livestock, but I know family members and friends that do raise crops. And so, this is the kind of stuff. And my neighbor, he tills a field with a little tractor and it's really cute. It's that this kind of stuff comes up. And so watching this episode, it was like a big nostalgia trip. I'm like, yes, I know what you're talking about. He's like, we'll have to till it shallowly. We don't want to break the plow. And I like that says something for Einar's character, that he is very careful of the things he is given. He's very careful with the horse. He's very careful with the plow. He doesn't just run it to death and then take it back and be like, sorry, I broke it. No, he's very careful with what he's been given. And I like that. I like that we get that with his character. And so then he talks about seeing everybody else with all the plows. He's like, they've got a total of 10 heavy plows after buying 4 more this year. Yeah, farm equipment, even back then and even now, is expensive. And so, but it helps you get more efficiently done with what you need to do. He says, our master's unbelievably wealthy. And him having 10 plows, because he says, in my village, 8 of us, 8 families split 1, and he owns 10. So he's very, very wealthy. That using that to establish just how much money he has is interesting. He's like, the retainers wouldn't let us borrow one. So we're lucky with Sverkel. And then, of course, Thorfinn's like, well, it would be different to do this all by hand and with hoes. And he's like, yes. Having this in a horse makes a world of difference. And then Thorfinn, I like Thorfinn saying an incredible invention. It must have been invented by a farmer. Someone unfamiliar with how difficult farming is couldn't have made this. So yeah, Thorfinn's learning all kinds of things. Look at him. But it's the idea that necessity kind of breeds invention, right? The idea that they needed something to help them do it. So humanity, if it's put in a corner, the idea that humanity can adapt. So there is that idea that humanity can adapt and overcome adverse situations. And the way that he phrased that is saying that someone unfamiliar with how difficult farming is couldn't have made this. So Thorfinn kind of saying that you need to understand hardship to know how to overcome it. That's kind of the cool thing is he's like, you need to understand how hard something is to figure out how to get through it, which is kind of where Thorfinn is right now. Thorfinn's been in a rut and he's like, I'm stuck in this like pit of despair, but by understanding it and going along this journey with Einar and kind of figuring things out, it's going to allow him to overcome it because he knows what it's like to be at the bottom of the barrel, right? So I feel like Thorfinn understanding the hardship is going to allow him to know how to overcome it. He's just not quite, he needs that goal to give him a little bit of motivation. He needs that goal to build that necessity, right? Right now, he can't invent anything to help him get out of the situation because there's not that necessity. Up until now, he just didn't really have any motivation to live. So he's just now getting to that point. So once he gets a goal in mind, then the gears can start turning and he can figure out how to make his own plow. How does he get the plow? Einar is going to be the horse. Einar is Thorfinn's horse, however you want to phrase that. Einar is figuratively the horse in this situation that he needs to help him get out of this rut. He just needs to figure out what's the plow. Thorfinn needs a plow. He's got the horse. He's got Einar. He's got his means of helping him to get out of a situation. Now he just needs a plow. He needs to figure out and invent some way to help him get out and have a goal in mind. We're halfway there, y'all. We need a horse. Thorfinn's got one. So, but yeah. And I just love Einar looking at him like with this little smile on his face. He's like, you really don't know anything about farming, do you? It's like everything's new to you. You're like an overgrown baby. Yeah, and Thorfinn kind of is. He is like, he's always been kind of plateaued in this childlike state of mental. His mental and social state has been like at age 6 the last 20 years. So yeah, he is far behind on that, right? And Thorfinn's like, oh, I just love he just has this like little blank look on his face. Him with his hair down, though. He looks a lot like, he has like his dad's features, but his mom's hair. It's crazy. And then it starts to rain. And they go to Sverkel's house where he's with Kettle. And he's asking Kettle if he's prepared for the rain. So Kettle is worried about his dad's health. Saying he's too old. He's pushing himself. He's too old. And Kettle is worried about him. Which I'm glad. I'm glad that Kettle is worried about his dad. And the thing about it is, Sverkel does bring up a good point. Sometimes you don't get along with family members, and it is best that you live apart because if you're too close together too long, especially with family, it can get ugly. So especially if you they have very different personalities, different perspectives about the world. Sometimes you need that distance. Like it's good to be in contact, it's good to see them, it's good to keep those connections, but sometimes you need space that if things get heated, you can back off and sort things out and then come back to the table, right? So I understand why Sverkel wouldn't want to live with his son. He says you collapsed on your farm the other day and you got lucky because Snake was around. So that's where Snake comes in, and we're going to put Snake right here. So Snake is in charge of watching Sverkel. That's why he was there the other episode. That's why he's been there the whole time. He's been watching him since he collapsed. That all makes sense. Glad that we've come back and gone full circle with that. And he says, it's my wish to die on my farm. So, and that makes sense for Sverkel because it seems like this is something he earned for himself. And he talks about that like, he's like, I didn't have these other workers do it. I did this all myself. I maybe hired people to help me, but I didn't have slaves. I did this all myself. I made it on my own. He's like, this is my pride. This is something that I have that I value. So he's like, I want to die here. This is his Vinland, right? He says, living by yourself at your age is ridiculous enough. You're not capable of physical labor. And he's like, mind your own business. I got these 2 young hot guys helping me, so just back off. 3 if you count Snake. He's like, don't be stubborn. And he says, you and I think too differently. Yeah. If we live together, we just end up arguing again. I like that Thorfinn's like there, like cuddling, like clutching his thing. He looks so small there, right? Aw. And Einar's like, we can't go in there right now. It's too awkward. And then that's when Kettle leaves. He's like, think about what I said. And so then, of course, he finds out what's going on by seeing them. He's like, what are you boys doing here? And they're like, well. And he's like, Dad, do whatever. You can't just do whatever you want. These are my slaves. And he's like, young whippersnapper. And so then he lets him in and was like, come on in. That, again, he completely ignores what Kettle says. Takes the porridge and he's like, you're wet. While you're here, wash your clothes. And so I'm thoroughly expecting AO3 to give me all the bathhouse, and then there was one bathroom to give me all the bathhouse fix. No, I'm not getting on AO3 for any fanfiction for Vinland Saga until I'm done, sadly. But if you in the Discord find some really good Sverkel's bathtub fix you want to send me, no, not happening, but feel free to. But no, he's like, those 2 must not get along. And then we see the spear and the sword, which they don't see on the wall, but I am sure that Snake has seen, right? And I feel like part of Snake's reception towards Sverkel is because of those swords, right? He goes, I feel like he has seen the swords and the spear that Sverkel has. Mm-hmm. I just feel like that's the case. I feel like he has a rapport with Sverkel. He knows about them. Mm-hmm. And so the 2 of them come out of the rain. And he's like, where's the wash tub? And that's where he sees in the bed, he sees Snake. He's like, it's Hibby. He's like, Hibby? And yeah, he's just sitting there with a book in hand. Sitting there sleeping with his book all sprawled out. No worries. I'm curious, he's always reading. Is he reading the same book? Or is he reading different books? I feel like, I don't know if Sverkel would have a bunch of books. I feel like he'd just have one. I'm curious which book he's reading, right? And then Sverkel waking up, or Snake waking up, he doesn't wake up to them. That part doesn't wake him up. It's smelling the food. He's like, Gramps, you're cooking, aren't you? He's like, I'm not letting you eat by yourself again. Oh, now see, that's really cute. Snake and Sverkel's relationship is adorable. I kind of love it. And he's like, damn it, I see you're awake. And then he sees them. He's like, why are you here? When he said, did you come to sneak into my... Note. Snake did not say, did you come to kill me? Did you come to kill me in my bed or strangle me in my bed? He said, did you come to sneak into my bed? Like, I'm just saying, Einar may not be the only bisexual king. I feel no. If Einar's our bisexual king, then Snake is our pansexual king. Snake doesn't even care. He's just like, you want to go? He's like, Gramps, you want to go? You want to go? Snake has no preference. But he does like the ladies. Make note, he does have the smolder. I just love it. He's like, did you come to sneak in my bed? And Einar's like, really? With you, man? And then the Thorfinn's like, I'm not opposed. He says, good morning. You're a hopeless man. You're only awake during meal times. Don't you think it's embarrassing? And he's like, how can you brazenly eat when you don't even work? And he's like, shut up, Gramps, I'm protecting you. He's like, thieves come at night, so I have to come and the farm's peaceful because we patrol it. So we deserve the food. That's why I got no problem eating. I like that. Again, we didn't see Einar and Thorfinn, but they're like in just the random clothes that were set out for them. How are you guarding anything when all you do is sneak into young women's houses? And he's like, we're guarding the young women so they don't get stolen. Smooth, Snake, Smolder. He's just like, somebody's got to go and check on all the ladies. I mean, just what a smooth man. And I love the Sverkel. Sverkel's like, you've always got to come back. And he's like, so do you, Gramps. I love it. I love their relationship. I don't want anything bad to happen to Sverkel, but I feel like something bad's going to happen to him. No, he's too nice of an old man. Something bad's going to happen to him, and I'm not ready for it. I just, And they're building up him and Snake's relationship, and it's so good. I'm just like, no, something bad's going to happen. Sverkel's going to get killed. It's going to be really sad, and I'm not ready for that. But notice, we'll talk about the sword and the spear. But yeah, Snake's just like just their camaraderie is so good. And then here's the thing. He sees him, he's like, what are you guys doing? He's like, come over here and eat. Haven't you eaten yet? And they're both like, I love that they just look like, we're allowed to? We're slaves, right? He's like, are you sure? And then I like that Snake says, yeah, this is some porridge. It ain't fancy shit. Get over here and eat this. And I like that Sverkel says, how dare you? It's like, I fed you food and you call it swill? I love it. But then he looks at them and says, if you worked today, you've earned the right to eat. And that's the difference. Yeah, I feel like Sverkel, he says, if you worked, then you've earned it. He's like, it doesn't matter if you're a slave or if you're free or not. If you did something, if you contributed in some way, then you are worthy of getting food. Then you've helped. You're not a freeloader. You're not doing anything. You're not just sitting around. If you did something, you're worthy of it. It doesn't matter if you're a slave or not. Don't care. I feel like he doesn't care about the slave title. That thing is silly to him. And we don't know Sverkel's backstory. Was Sverkel a slave? We don't know. But he's just like, no, if you worked, you earned it. And Snake, on the other hand, Snake doesn't seem like, he seems kind of like ass-glad. He doesn't care about any social convention. He's just like, nah, get the food. Just do it. Again, you feel like he's kind of like ass-glad, right? And again, I love Thorfinn with his hair down. It's so sweet. Like seeing him with his hair all brushed out. It makes him look younger, but his face is so hardened that it's kind of jarring, right? And Einar's like, yes, food. And they actually get like sausage links. They get bread. They get porridge. It's not a bad deal. And so they ask if thieves come to the farm, and they're like, and Snake's like, yes, they get the wheat, they get pigs, that sort of thing. They come all the time. And so he's like, some of them are armed too. So being up those guys and capturing them is our job. I like just, Snake is so well drawn. He's like so handsome. It's like, he's like smoldering the camera 24/7. He's like, we really do our work around here. And Sverkel's like, yeah, whatever. What we lose to the thieves is equal to what we pay you. That part is, he's not wrong, because he's like, we're basically paying for all you men to come here. There's 14 of you, or 13 or 14. He's like, what we pay you is what they would steal. He's like, what else are they going to steal from us other than wheat and pigs, right? But it's the concept of it, right? It's the concept. It's like when somebody asks, like some people are like, oh, you should lock your car and stuff. I'm like, I literally have nothing in their value. There's like maybe like some defogger. I guess you can get that if you want it, or a blanket. But it's one of those things where, you know, some people don't lock their cars because they're like, there's nothing of value in here. I guess if you hotwired it, it'd be a problem. But like, and then some people are like, oh no, they can't, you know, have anything with it. I feel like Sverkel's in the former category. He's like, let it go. Like, it's not a big deal. And Snake's like, you really know how to piss someone off, don't you? He's like, we could chase off thieves without your help. So Sverkel is very much along the lines of, we could do it ourselves. We, you know, if we were, it's kind of this idea that Sverkel, he is very much the old school mentality of defending, the pride of defending your own land, right? With your own bare hands. It's that sort of thing. Whereas Kettle is kind of like, no, we're going to hire, so it's easier. Yeah, it's the fact of the matter is, like, what they're protecting isn't necessarily worth any more than what they're getting paid, is what Sverkel's saying. Sverkel's like, we should just do it ourselves. We don't have to hire out workers to protect our land. We could do it ourselves. But Kettle's kind of like, he wants to live an easier life without having to defend his own land. So he's like, yeah, it may, not make fiscal sense for me to do it, but it lets me live a more luxurious, easy life, hiring someone else to protect me. Whereas Sverkel's like, no, you just use your own fists to defend yourself. So again, two different totally philosophies on how to handle things. And I think that's why Snake respects Sverkel so much, where he's like, I respect you, old man. You're full of salt and vinegar. I like it. And he says, we're Nordic men. We're Nordic men, like we're warriors, right? He's suggesting that we're Norsemen, we're men of honor. We should not have to resort to hiring people out to protect us. I respect that. I also want to make note, on the wall there is a spear and a sword. I'm just saying, Snake's got his own sword. He's fine, but it just so happens, is it setting up that Thorfinn and Einar could come back if something happened to Sverkel and take these weapons? Could Einar get the spear and Thorfinn get the sword, or vice versa? It just seems rather, if there was just one sword hanging up there, I wouldn't think anything about it. But the moment we see both the sword and the spear there, I'm like, that seems like it's foreshadowing that Thorfinn and Einar are going to come back here, like if something happens to Sverkel, and he's going to make them take the weapons and like defend themselves or do something. So I'm just saying, I'm just seeing it happening, but maybe it won't. But it just seems like the moment he said that and it cut to those two weapons, I was like, those are going to be Thorfinn and Einar's. That's going to the weapons they use to escape. Maybe. Because Olmar has his own. He wouldn't need one. We know how to use swords and spears. And then we'll have, if that were to be the case, Einar knows all about farming, Thorfinn knows all about battle, and Thorfinn's going to be like, okay, you're an overgrown baby because you don't know how this works either. Could be. We'll see. He's like, could you still fight at your age? He says, don't flatter yourself, Snake. There are plenty of fighters more skilled than you. Yeah, we've seen one. I'm just worried about your health, old man. And so that's when Snake knows that Thorfinn's a warrior. He knows what's up. He's like, despite what you say, this farm's fighting force is too small for its scale. And I do agree with that. He's like, this farm they've established is huge, and they've just established there's all these plows and stuff that are worth a lot of money. They're like, yeah, if somebody came along and didn't just want wheat and pigs, but actually wanted to steal some of our big equipment or take some of our people, yeah, there's not really anybody here to defend us. There's 13 of us. Like an army of 50 could come in, we'd be in a lot of trouble. So he's like, the farm is to the fighting force, 13 men's all we've got. Their hands full chasing down these thieves. You could take this farm with 50 or 60 men. Yeah. So, and he's like, right, Thorfinn? Like Snake calls Thorfinn out because Snake knows that Thorfinn's fought in an army before. He knows. He figured that out from fighting him the other day. He's like, I know your past. I've got an idea. And he questions Thorfinn about it. Thorfinn has like the anime hair in the middle of his face. And that smolder. Like Snake knows. I am not going to argue with anything Snake says. And Thorfinn's like, I'm not sure. Again, Thorfinn was a kid, so Thorfinn's been in the battlefield and he's killed people for years, but he wasn't ever involved in anything tactical, right? I don't think, they didn't call Thorfinn to the table when they were making battle plans. They just said, go do this thing. They treated him like a dog and didn't ever let him come to the big kids' table. So yeah, he is kind of like an overgrown baby in that sense. And Einar's like, And he says, nothing tougher than thieves ever comes here. And Snake's like, well, you don't know that. I'm like, I was like, Snake and Sverkel are like, they're jinxing this thing all over the place. I'm like, now you're just asking someone to come. He says, it'll be too late once it's already happening. Like, there won't be any time to prepare because there is no contingency plan. And he says, regardless of what happens, I won't ever come crying to your lot. I love that Sverkel's like, I'm going to go down fighting. And Einar's asking the question we're all thinking, like, why don't you just get other people other than thieves? And he's like, oh, sorry, I was out of line. He says, because of King Harold's influence. So, okay, so we are not in England, right? We're not in England. No, we're in Denmark, aren't we? Are we in Denmark? I feel like we're in Denmark. Questions. I don't want answers to these. We'll probably find out in the next episode or so. Not wanting to know right now. One of the fun mysteries about this show at the moment is that we don't know when we are. We have two different timelines going on. We have Canute's timeline over here where we do have a time frame. We do know that we're in England and it's 1018. We know that's happening in Canute's timeline. We don't know when and where we are over here. We know there's Kettle's farm. Don't know a year. Don't know a place. So it's all a mystery until we see like how closely connected these two storylines are or how far apart they are. So that's kind of the fun thing. But we're getting a little bit here to know that it's King Harold's influence. So I'm assuming that we're at Denmark. So that kind of makes sense. That answers my question from last episode. Last episode, I was like, where's Harold in all this? He's probably still over in Denmark. He's like, I'm not leaving. Which kind of makes sense. I don't blame him. He's like, let my little brother and whoever else fight over England. Have fun. I'm going to stay over in Denmark and rule. Peace up, A-Town. So that makes more sense. So maybe we're in Denmark. And Olmar wants to leave the country to go to England with Canute. So that he just wants to leave and have his life away from home in England, go study abroad for a semester, and go join the army with Canute. Okay. So yeah, that seems to be what we're case. That Thorfinn and Einar are in Denmark and Canute's over in England. So if that's the case, we might be pretty far apart. But again, I feel like as the series goes on, we're going to get more answers. But he's like, twice a year, Kettle sends an absurd amount of tribute to him. Like antlers, like wheat, like bags of flour, like wine, tribute. So he's been buying his peace. Again, the price of freedom. He sends him this absurd amount of tribute to him. And says because the king accepts it, he's obligated to protect Kettle. And Thorfinn kind of just looks at that moment, right? Thorfinn looking there, saying it's foolishness. Buying peace with money is foolishness. That is so good. Oh man. I love this idea that Kettle is a slave to peace and luxury and to his wealth. He's like, it's stupid to buy your peace. He's like, you should defend it yourself and make it for yourself. You shouldn't have to pay with money to get some freedom. So Kettle's almost a slave himself. He has slaves to make him money so that he can pay that money to Harold. So he's like a slave to Harold. In order for him to have a peaceful life, he has to pay Harold to keep himself safe. It's kind of fascinating that this idea that even the man that's the wealthiest man in the village is a slave to someone else, trying to buy his freedom and buy his peace twice a year. So it's crazy. And then Sverkel goes on to say that what need is there to hold so much land? A single farmer can't defend it himself. So yeah, he's just saying, he's like, things are getting out of hand. It's too far gone. There's too much. He's like, he has more than he needs. He's living beyond his means. And he says, how many days do you think it would take to get from here to Gelling? We're the ones actually defending the farm. Okay, so Gelling, I'm going to go back in a second and look at episode 5 in the map. I'm going to check that out here in just a second. But he's talking about Gelling. And he says that Snake is defending. Snake and his men are defending the farm. Fox and Badger and the others, right? That they're the ones defending. Okay. He says, too much wealth brings about misfortune. He's like, you're ignoring me, old man. And so, yeah, this is so true, though. This is so true. I'm like just like preaching to the choir. He says, too much wealth brings misfortune. And I'm thinking of Heaven Official's blessing right now, too. So there's that fun time. he says that your wealth going up increases your fear of losing it. It's like you get a taste of the honey and you don't want to turn off. You want to keep it going. You're afraid to lose it once you have it, right? And then he says you spend money to assuage your fears and then you have to earn more. It just creates a cycle. It's a capitalist cycle, right? You just keep making money and then you're afraid to lose it. So you spend money to make yourself feel better, but then you have to make more money to do that. He's like, my idiot son hasn't realized how pointless it is. And Thorfinn's thinking about that, and Snake's just like rolling his eyes. He's like, I don't want this old man giving lectures to me anymore. I'm gonna go. And then he sees that the rain has stopped. I love that he's just like stretching himself all over the place like a damn snake, saying it stopped raining. And then I love that smolder. He's like, I'm gonna go and see the ladies and anybody else I find. Time to go patrolling. I'm like, oh my god. And that Sverkel's like, don't come back. And then him looking at the old man. Oh, he's like, but you miss me when I don't. He's just such a snake. Just like oozing. He's like, you'll miss me if I don't come back. It's like, this is our love language, right? It's our love language, Snake and Sverkel. Oh my god. Again, such a father and son dynamic, right? But it's different than that. He's like, get out of here. We said this with Monster. Like, the tsunderes aren't like the young ladies. They're like these old men that are tsunderes. And so then as they're walking back, that's when he's like, I love that Einar's like, those two were weird. He's like, they had a weird relationship. Like, what's going on there, huh? Old men deserve love too, damn it. And if it's with a hot guy, sure. They get along better than actual father and son. They do. They do. And he's like, they do. And then I love Thorfinn saying, I feel like I learned a lot of things today. God, that screenshot, I'm gonna use that screenshot every day if I can. I learned a lot of things today. Our boy Thorfinn, I cannot believe it. I love it so much. And Einar's just like, I love Einar. He's like, well, you are an overgrown baby. Like, Einar's face to Thorfinn is my face to Thorfinn. I'm just like, he's like, good for you, you overgrown baby. It's like, don't call me that. And then Thorfinn's saying, too much wealth, huh? The concept of it, too much wealth. And that's such an interesting thing, because I think how you define wealth is kind of, I agree with Sverkel in terms of monetary wealth, in terms of the capitalist aspect of it, that I do think that capitalism and that kind of thing does make you wary, and money becomes this fickle thing that you become greedy with, but fearful with, and it creates this really nasty cycle, and it affects the way that you interact with other people because of money. Like, it's just a really bad thing, right? But the idea of too much wealth, I feel like money is a different thing than like love, right? Can you have a wealth of love? Is there too much of that? I'm curious when Thorfinn is questioning Thorfinn being like, too much wealth, huh? I almost feel like he's saying that maybe in terms of money that's true, but I feel like Thorfinn wants to say a yes and or a yes but kind of response. I feel like he wants to respond with something else, but he doesn't know how to articulate it yet, so I'm going to be curious to see if Thorfinn answers his own question, if he answers it somehow later in the series, and what he does about that, right? So then they go back to, they've cleared the trees, they're spreading seeds, right? And it's springtime now, so it's like, it's getting to be, or maybe it's not winter yet, it's autumn still, but they're spreading the seeds, and we have Thorfinn's like scarred up hands. Yeah, the trees are changing, so it's like, it's autumn. And he's like, you can spread more seeds. He's like, but isn't this all we have? And they've got their little goatees. It's really cute. He's like, grab huge handfuls. It'll be fine. Like, you can spread more seeds than that. He's like, I'm your friend. Trust me. He's like, friend? I love that Einar's like, really? You're questioning this after all we've been through? Why would you question that? We're friends, aren't we? Or are we not? And that little smile! He gives like just the little ghost of a grin. Our boy Thorfinn, the little ghost of a grin. I'm just like, oh, Thorfinn made a friend. He has. It just makes my heart sore. Right? And he's like, no, you are my friend. Aww. And he takes the big handful and spreads it. And his hand, like, with all the scars and everything. Oh. Like, just that gnarled hand. And they've got that big old plot of land cleared. We're friends. Aww. Be a shame if nothing bad happens in the next episode. Oh, I feel like this is the biggest, no, it's too much wholesomeness for Vinland Saga. I know how this is gonna go. Vinland Saga gave us this really nice episode with friendship, with warmth, with compassion, with Snake and Sverkel, with good things happening. This series gave us something good. I know how this song and dance goes. Next episode, they're gonna be like, wow, wasn't that a great episode? Wasn't that heartwarming? Wasn't that fun? You ready for us to stomp your soul out now? You're gonna be like, no, please. I want Thorfinn to keep smiling. So, no, I'm dreading. I'm dreading next episode. I'm dreading it. Because I know what's going to happen. It's not going to be good. No. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe we'll have more fun farm simulator with Thorfinn and Einar. I'm here for it, but I can't believe we're at the goatee stage already. They were just not going to let Canute get away with it. They had to match, right? They had to match. It's so weird seeing them as adults. I will not get over seeing Canute and Thorfinn as adults. It's always going to bug me. I'm going to be like, what? How? But how? Because normally in anime, you don't see it, right? And it's like not till the very end. You follow your anime protagonists. They are perpetually 15 or 16 years old for 10 years. And then at the very, very end, they suddenly have a wife and a kid. And you're like, well, that was it, wasn't it? And now, in one season, we've already aged up Thorfinn. And he's grown into a man. And I feel like it should be the end game. And we're just starting. It's so bizarre. But I love it. So, I really like this episode. I love the themes of it. I like Sverkel and Snake's relationship. Nothing surely will bad happen to Sverkel, after we've foreshadowed it this entire episode. I like Snake's developing relationship with Thorfinn and Einar. I like that he respects them. I like that he's kind of he's snarky and he's slithery and he's smoldering, but he's a good character and I like Snake a lot. And do I ship Snake and Sverkel? I wish I was joking. Vinland Saga, when there's little romance, we'll fill in the gaps. But yeah, I really liked this episode a lot. It was great. I am very curious to know your thoughts down below. But I hope you all enjoyed this reaction and discussion. I had a lot of fun with this episode. I'm absolutely dreading the next because I feel like it's not going to be the case. So, but happy Valentine's Day! We can ship all over the place with these hypothetical situations. So, in the meantime, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yes, I will be back next week with episode 7 of Vinland Saga.